Secrets from the Tombs, an Afterlife cloning experiment. This audio presentation is read and voiced by Shakim Ra. It is provided to the public by Amenhotep University. The day of King Tut's funeral. On the day of Tut's burial, a long line of people followed his coffin in boats across the Nile. Once on land, the coffin, actually there were three, like nesting dolls, was pulled on a sled. It was going to a royal graveyard. This dusty, lonely area west of the Nile was called the Valley of the Kings. In some photographs, the area looks like a natural pyramid made of rock. Many other pharaohs were buried there, so priests stood, guarding day and night. Nearby was a separate cemetery for queens and members of the court. It was called the Valley of the Queens. At the head of the parade to the Valley of the Kings were the priests. Along the way, they sang songs and chanted prayers. One of the priests wore a mask with a dog face on it. He was supposed to represent Anpu, the god of the mummy. Tut's young queen walked nearby. Following behind her were a group of women. They would have all been wailing and crying and tearing at their clothes. These mourners were there to express sadness over Tut's death. After the mourners came servants, hundreds of them. They were carrying all the furniture, food, and other items to go in the tomb. They also brought along many little statues that looked like servants. Once these were placed in the tomb, it was believed that these statues would come to life. Then, the dead king, Tutankhamun, would have all the servants he needed to take care of him. At the entrance to the tomb, Tut's mummy was propped upright, vertically. The time had come for a very important ceremony. It was called the opening of the mouth. While the prayer was said, a priest touched the eyes, mouth, and ears of the mummy. The sound vibrations, or heka, translated as magic, was believed to bring the pharaoh back to life again. He would be able to speak and see and hear. After that, the only thing left to do was to bury the pharaoh inside his tomb. Once Tut's mummy was back in its coffins, it was placed inside a great stone box and hidden deep inside the tomb. A pile of rocks sealed up the entrance. Afterward, all the mourners took part in a great feast. Everyone was joyful now, for the dead king had ascended to the sky. Tut was about to enter the land of the dead. He would live and be happy forever. They were sure that his mummy was safe, hidden away for all eternity. But they were wrong. By the late 1800s, many tombs of the pharaohs had been found. The trouble was that all of them were empty. The dream of every archaeologist was to find one that hadn't been looted. Many thought that was just a wild dream. They didn't believe there was even one tomb left with treasures. Howard Carter was practically the only man who thought there was. An early death. Chapter 4. During Amenhotep's 16-year-long rule, the empire did not run smoothly. The lands under Egypt's control had to pay tribute. This meant that every year they had to send riches to the pharaoh. For instance, from Nubia in the south came gold. Lebanon had to send rare cedar wood. But the Egyptian army had grown weaker. Tribute had stopped coming in. Then, Amenhotep IV was gone, and King Tut was just a child. How could he be expected to make the empire strong again? The real power now lay with Tut's vizier or chief minister and one of the army generals. King Tut was the ruler in name only. He appeared at ceremonies and holidays. If Tut had lived beyond his teen years, perhaps he would have grown up to become a strong and wise ruler. Or maybe he always would have been under the thumb of his advisors. Perhaps they were afraid that if Tut had more power, he might try to bring back the strange ways of Amenhotep IV, Akhenaten. Instead, the temples of the older gods were reopened, and Thebes, not Amarna, became the royal city once again. Tut moved back there with his queen. They may have had children. In Tut's tomb, along with his coffin, 2 tiny coffins were also found. They contained the bodies of 2 baby girls. It is possible that they were Tut's children. What we do know is this: he didn't leave a son behind to become pharaoh after his death. And even in a time when most people did not live to age 40, Tut still died very young. He was only 18 or 19 years old. The tomb of Tutankhamun was very small for a pharaoh. It had only 4 rooms. That's because it was meant for someone else, probably a member of the court. But when Tut died, his own much grander tomb was not ready. There was no choice except to bury him someplace else. What they did was dry out the body. They turned it into a mummy. Over the centuries, the ancient Egyptians became better and better at making mummies. Right after he died, Tut's body was ferried by boat across the Nile River. There, the priests were waiting. Their job was to make his body into a mummy. From start to finish, it took about 70 days. First, the pharaoh's body had to be cut open. This was so the organs inside could be removed. The Egyptians believed that the heart, or the ebb, was the seat of thought and wisdom. Tut's spirit would need his heart in the afterlife, so it stayed in his body. But the priests removed his lungs, liver, stomach, and intestines. Each was put in a special jar, protected by a different god. Later on, these jars were placed inside Tut's tomb, along with his mummy. The Egyptians didn't think a person's brain did much of anything, so, with a thin hook that went in through the nose, they scraped out Tut's brain, then threw it away. After this, Tut's hollow body was ready to be dried out. The priests used a salt called natron. For about 40 days, Tut's body lay packed in natron. Slowly, the salt dried out all the water from the body. The skin became tough and dry like leather. To keep its shape, the body was stuffed with scented rags. Then, it was ready to be wrapped in yards and yards of fine white cloth. The priests said prayers as they wrapped up the pharaoh's mummy. The wrapping took 15 days. The priests placed little good luck charms in between the layers of cloth. Many of the charms were made of gold and pretty colored stones in different shapes. Some were heart-shaped, some called scarabs, looked like beetles. Still others looked like tiny eyes. They were meant to keep evil spirits away from Tut. Once his body was all wrapped up, the cloth layers were coated with something like glue. When it dried, the wrapping became hard, like a shell around the mummy. Now Tut's mummy was ready for his funeral. Tutankhamun's funeral accompanies an exhibition at the Metropolitan Museum of Art that illuminates an intriguing cache discovered in the Valley of the Kings more than a century ago. In 1908, when Herbert H. Wenlock encountered the archaeological team of Theodore Davis, he was at the start of his career, newly employed by the Metropolitan Museum. Like Davis and his colleagues, Wenlock could not identify the objects and materials unearthed that winter, but when Davis agreed to donate the lot to the museum, Wenlock brought them back to New York, and they became part of the permanent collection. During his research over the next several years, Wenlock came to realize the tremendous significance of the finds. These were the remains from the involvement and last rites of Tutankhamun, the now legendary New Kingdom pharaoh who reigned briefly in the 14th century BC. The Isis Thesis, Chapter 26, originally written by Judy K. King. The path on Earth back to the early universe, where the road from Orion dead ends. The path the deceased follows through the Earth's cell can be traced along the Nile River on ancient maps of Egypt. The journey begins at Abydos, the site of the famous Egyptian gap of entry into the Duat. From here, the deceased proceeds north along the winding waterway of the Nile River to Sais, near Giza, the site where Osiris is lodged. Then he exits into the mouth of the Nile that opens into the Mediterranean Sea, that is, the primordial waters of the cosmos and starry Nuke. At this point, we can reconsider the meaning of the opening of the mouth ceremony that emphasizes the importance of repeating words and ceremonies 4 times. The deceased is true of voice, Ma'akeru, and has been found worthy at the judgment of Crow in CI protein levels. Because of his true status, the deceased has opened the mouth 4 times. First, he opened the mouth by merging with the Lambda sun god. Then, King Tut opened the mouth of the Duat by entering the Earth cell. Third, he opened the mouth of Osiris by excising the prophage and activating the Horus species. Fourth, King Tut opened the mouth out of the Duat to enter the early universe. He has broken iron 4 times as the pyramid texts advise. Interestingly enough, meteorites were discovered in the tomb of King Tut. From the quantum mechanical black hole perspective, the opening of the mouth ceremony, with its emphasis on 4 times, signifies the movement of the deceased across 4 horizons. He passes through the black hole's outer event horizon into the inner event horizon, then through the white hole's outer and inner event horizons. When the Earth opens its mouth for the deceased, the mouth is a reference to the mouth of a wormhole, which is comprised of a black hole and a white hole. Put simply, the deceased journeys through 4 mouths or horizons to emerge in the early universe. This quantum wormhole magnetic field configuration depends on the deceased as the polymerase complex plowing straight through the DNA instead of circulating or transcribing around it. Thus, plowing straight through the DNA is not the template for the topological condensation of ordinary matter, human beings. It is the template for a movement of genetic information between remotely related species, a horizontal gene transfer of eukaryotic DNA mediated by a virus. Still, mysteries remain about this act. Iron, a silvery white transition metal with its 26 protons and 30 neutrons, is a necessary element in magnetic fields and DNA. It is essential for humans as it is the chief constituent of hemoglobin, which carries oxygen in blood vessels. In the atmosphere, iron-containing particles scatter sunlight back into space and cause cooling. Olivier Manuel, a professor of nuclear chemistry, believes iron, not hydrogen, is the sun's most abundant element. Although some of the sun's hydrogen heat moves to its surface, Manuel believes that most of the heat comes from its exploded supernova core that still generates energy from within its iron-rich interior. Astrophysicists assert that iron is created in the center of massive stars and expelled when the stars explode as supernovae. Iron and other heavy elements then mix with interstellar matter and form new stars and planetary systems. The stars in Orion span the entire range of star types, so perhaps the source of cosmic rays on Earth is from Orion. In the quantum Egyptian afterlife, the deceased accepts Orion's staff of rank and journeys on the guided diffusion pathway to eternity through the black hole Duat. But remember, there is no path because the point particle is spread out over the non-locality region. If the ultra-high energy iron nuclei that arrive at Earth are from Orion, then that cosmic ray is actually a line extending from Orion to Earth, because one cannot define a point in space in a quantum vacuum since its state is all of space. The Pharaohs would have us believe that we can access this non-local road from Orion to Earth, an ultra-high energy wave of core elements, by going to the polar cusp or true north. This energization and magnetic alignment, this attunement, as the philosopher Heidegger would say, guarantees to us humans a passage to those beings that we ourselves are not, and access to the being that we ourselves are. Here, the geometry of our universe is flat or two-dimensional, and the great plane of iron on which our God stands stretches before us. Coffin Text 479. So it seems that there could be an invisible magnetic field stretched across the cosmos, an iron-rich network or bloodline uniting an invisible starry cosmos. As Dr. Faust would say, whoever ignores the element's cores, their energy and quality, cannot command in the spirit's land. Even though hieroglyphic translations and wall drawings depict Egyptian ideas dating to the pyramid text, the funerary corpus as a whole is unified in its presentation of scientific thought. In fact, this scientific knowledge becomes more precise as it evolves from the old kingdom to the new kingdom, equaling or bettering our 21st century understanding of how the universe operates. And yet, many outstanding questions remain. If knowledge is power in the afterlife as the Pharaohs attest, then we can be consoled by the wisdom of the deceased Tutankhamun, who proclaims, To me belongs yesterday. I know tomorrow